You look like Wolverine.
And we are live on Oz Property Investment. We're bringing the big names on Jeff's back and we're going to have the big fun. Wolverine fun. Rah. I don't know what that was.
Going on.
Okay. Now that we're getting professional. But so tonight's going to be a cracking session. We're going to talk about this guy. He's bought a shopping center. You don't see that every day, and sold 5 resis. So how you feeling, Steve, about that?
I'm good. You know me, I've purchased quite a few properties now. So it's just, the funny thing is, it's no matter what, even like I've done 2,000 acquisitions, I still second guess myself every time I go to buy a property. Whereas with it's client, you're like, yep, it's a good deal. I've checked the numbers, you're sweet. And then when you're buying it yourself, you're always like, should I triple check the numbers? I feel like I've missed something. So it's always funny, especially as your purchases start getting bigger and bigger.
Definitely. When it's at $3 million, like that's a massive transition. I'm keen to unpack this one because I don't want to say you've packed it in, but you've pulled up stumps from a residential standpoint. You were saying, you know what? Capital growth is now not the main focus for me. And we are building a positive portfolio of $150,000 passive income. People are learning along the way. So far in the past 6 months, we've bought 4 properties and the total rent is $139,000. But I wanted to get you on, Steve, because you're at the end state. You know, we are a couple of, we're 6 months into our journey. You're kind of at the end of your journey right now. And you've done that kind of, you're moving the chess pieces in line to go with checkmate and get the hell out of here and live your best life. And I know there's some grays in that beard, but I don't see too many.
It's a hard one because you still have that ideology of like, oh, I should keep going, I should push harder, why don't I just leverage up and I'll be way wealthier down the track. And I remember when I was an engineer, my dream was to have a 2-bedroom apartment on the Northern Beaches, paid off, and I was like, yeah, cool, happy days. And then all of a sudden it becomes a $100,000 passive income, then it's a 200, then it's a 300, and you just keep going. But your life stops changing after a few $100,000 passive income. Like you can still fly business class, you can still travel 24/7. Like anything after that is completely ego. And like without bad mouthing other buyers, and the ones that say like, I want 100 properties or here's my 2 Lambos and blah, all that type of stuff. We know that's all ego, which is fine if that brings them joy. But for me, I don't care. I don't even have a watch.
I'll tell you what's going to bring me joy tonight. Understand? I mean, maybe there's many things that bring me joy tonight, but we'll say that for later. But I want to know, well, how did you got started? Because you didn't just wake up one day and buy that shopping center. So we'll go on a little bit of that journey, and then we'll talk to, okay, great. What is your end game? Why did you decide to sell those resi, and what questions you ask? And then we'll talk to, well, how does one actually start building that 150K passive income commercial? Yes, some people have said, I'm just going to buy a $2 million commercial off the bat, and you got that 150K, but great. And then we'll go, well, actually, you've got some spreadsheets, you got all that stuff. So let's get cracking into this session. For those of you who haven't seen Steve Palise around and his magnificent beard, you are a mathematical and analytical developer. That just sounds too hard to say, but you are a chartered and mechanical engineer. And basically, you helped buy over 2,000 properties for people over this last sort of 10 years. So, and you've got so many courses, so many books. It's just, I don't know how you find time. But anyway, you are Steve Palise. You are here tonight to talk to us about how to get financially free, because that's why we're all doing this. I don't know. That's why I'm doing it. I don't know about you guys. But yeah.
Self-promotion time as well. As you guys know, these 2 free books. But next week, development book hits stores. So get the free development book on the website soon.
Didn't line that up very well, did we? Should have got you on next week. But it's not about developing tonight, because developing's not about necessarily all about passive income. So drop your questions and comments about this, about 150K, anything commercial, anything about how to get his beard sculpted the way he does, or what I'm doing with this. Drop it in. So first question, Steve, I want to know is where you're what have you been up to? Why the shopping center? What got you into that?
I'm not chasing high yield in regards to taking on risk. So for me, any purchase now, I'm not like, I can go out and get a 6.5%, 7.5% yielding stuff, and we buy stuff like that for clients all the time. But again, that doesn't change my dial. Whether I've end up with a 280 grand passive income or a 330, I want the carefree nature of it. So a shopping center is good for me because the one I'm going to show, it's got 8 tenants. And it's only had 2 vacancies in the last 10 years. And the longest period of vacancy was 6 months. And I'll go into the details. There's no competition around and things like that. So I'm like, sweet, if I lose 1, even 2 tenants, I've still got my passive income. It just takes a little bit of a hit, takes a 10 or 15% hit. And then there's probably one more purchase coming in a similar price point. So probably another 3-4 mil project. But I'll diversify out of shopping centers into like a multi-tenancy industrial. And I'll show you an example that we bought a client if you want as well. Again, just to mitigate the risk. So all of a sudden I'm going to have like 12, 13 tenants just in 2 assets, low risk, protect my thing, and then just keep it simple. I don't want to have 50 properties anymore where I got to juggle and maintenance and get 1,000 emails. Defeats the purpose of having it. So just a few simple ones and move on. I do want to point out, though, retail shopping centers, though, are probably the highest in regards to effort that you need of all the commercials. In industrials, like 3 concrete tilted panels and a roller door. Well, because there's common areas. When you're buying a warehouse, tenant covers everything. Like it's some concrete and a roller door. Like there's nothing. They look after everything. If there's roller door jams, they fix it. If the air can breaks, they fix it. There's no common areas. That's it. Whereas the shopping center, the property manager's got to organize like garbage pickup, cleanway, the grease traps getting cleaned, cleaning of the common bathrooms, and all like the minor renovations and things like that. So there's a few more.
Car park?
The car park, like even the maintenance cover, like tenants, if the car park cracks, is not going to cover that. You do have admin sinking funds and all that type of stuff, so that the money's there. But in regards to the actual management, that's a bit harder. Like I'm paying someone close to 20 grand a year to manage it. Which I take into account in the calculations, but there's a lot more kind of headaches with it. And there's like some stories of like someone got caught masturbating in the toilets a few weeks ago. So it's just like, oh shit, we're going to have to put another camera for the entryway for the toilet to make sure we can record who's coming and going. Someone a few years ago got caught shooting up caught shooting up heroin, and then like, I don't know, people breaking windows and like this, like, people hanging around. There's a bit more, whereas an industrial's simpler. So,
okay. So that sounds pretty, I mean, that sounds pretty stressful. Like, no, not stressful, but the demographic, how does that come into play? Or is this just what happens at shopping centers that I don't know about?
Yeah, pretty much just even at the high end ones, it still happens. It's like saying like, well, it depends what definition of high end. Like if you're trying to buy like a Mossman, completely different to like a Surfers Paradise, or mine's in Regents Park, which is in the Logan Council. So but it's going to happen. But why am I stressed if a window gets broken once every 5 years? Like the property manager calls the glass person, they fix it. You run it through insurance get fixed because I've got insurance for that. Like, so it's just the thing. But I was going to point out a lot of, a lot of little bits.
Do you have like a limit? Like, how do you limit that? Because you're obviously flat out busy in life. Do you have like, look, if it's $500, just don't even call me. Just action it. Do you set? Because that's what I do with my property managers for my residential portfolio. I'm like, look, I'm too busy. I do not care if it's going to cost $200 to send a plumber out. Just do it, and I'll pay the thing. Once it gets over $500, I want to know about it, and then let's action it. And then I get all these, not too many little bills. It's not enough where they're taking where I feel like they're taking advantage, but it allows me to be like, cool, I don't need to worry about the tap breaking or whatever.
Yeah, weirdly, it's not normally costs though that I have to worry about, because it's normally there's like the body corporate's got it, or there's insurance for it. So it's more the actual effort of actually doing it. So like, because there's insurance for everything, and then there's things like the admin sinking fund and all that stuff, like you're generally covered. So it's not as bad. I get the emails, the notifications, like the property manager say, hey, just FYI, I've done this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But again, I wanted to diversify. Like I didn't want to just have all industrial or retail. I wanted the center. And I'll go into why as well, because the retail center, because it's in a residential estate, I've got options in the residential one. I can build like multi-story units. I can add a second level on top with residential. So it gives me a few more options there. Whereas if you go by an industrial, you're sort of limited to inside the confine of the actual concrete walls. Like you can only do like a mezzanine floor, expand the office and things like that. This one gives me the development potential, which Jeff said, we're not talking about development, but that's part of the journey. And part of it, how you can get to a passive income quicker if you want to be aggressive, which I know you guys might be starting to do, like some form of splitter or renovation, even. Like there are ways to accelerate it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For the portfolio, we're going to be starting to. We've got one deal that has a subdivision potential, one deal that has a granny flat, and then right now we're pushing the renovation deals.
And there may be an option, Joe, to update the bedroom count, because there is that flexibility in those properties. So if you've got an option where you feel there is a third or a fourth bedroom, make sure you're getting on top of that.
We put the wall up, mate. The walls.
We'll talk about it next week, man. Let's. This is
not about us. It's about Steve.
Because the start of the question was like, how do we get to my position where you are buying these kind of slightly higher end commercial premises? Yeah. And the premise is with residential is leverage. Leverage is your friend. You guys are accelerating it through value add opportunities where you don't have to wait necessarily for the growth. You'll still get there. You're just shortening the time frame by 33% or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I wanted to ask this one, and then we'll talk about, I want to know more context. So you didn't do it overnight. I want to know about the journey, the ins and outs, and people talking about various interesting things. So keep asking these questions, people. But we've been asked, what about public liability, people tripping over pavers? I think that's really important, because although it may not seem that important, like if you got sued, it could all unravel. So how do you think about that, Steve?
You get insurance for it and you are covered.
There you go.
You get public indemnity, you get building insurance.
Have we lost Steve?
Oh, sorry. Same as if you own an apartment block. Like, you have insurance for it in case someone falls down the steps. Like, yeah, lucky for me, my partner's actually an insurance broker, so I get all the inside goss and stuff. But yeah, you just get insurance. That's the whole point of insurance, is to cover stuff like that.
Yeah. So there's no question too small, too little. To keep asking the team, but I want to know. So how did it all start, though? Well, let's take us back to Blacktown. I think it was 12, 13 years ago. So this didn't happen overnight. He didn't wake up one day and buy that commercial that shopping center. What did that look like, and how did the journey progress? Share as much or as little as you're willing to share.
I'll give you an but basically it was 230 grand, engineering intern, and I can't remember now, 60, 70 grand a year, whatever it was. So couldn't save up for a house. Yeah, couldn't save up for like a proper non-housing commission house. So I just got a little cheap one, just because I wanted to get them. I was at the time I was like Nathan Birch went to my high school. My brother was friends with him. So I was kind of like on the periphery of seeing some buyers agents and stuff like that doing those types of things. And then read a few books, read Margaret Lomas's book and all that type of stuff, and was like, yep, cool, let's buy one of these. Luckily, because I bought 2012, and I say luck in regards to I did the research, but like I still looked at the fundamentals and looked at like general like vacancy rates and that stuff. But lucky time the market, like 2012, Sydney took off, and I think I got it valued at like 300 a year later, and was just like, I've just made 70 grand, which is like 5 years worth of savings. And then OCD, Steve just researched the hell out of that from then. I didn't know about commercial back then, like pretty much everyone up until about 5 years ago, and was just on the path for building a passive income through resi. So bought like more regional properties. So bought like in Cairns, I bought in Foster, Tamworth and stuff like that, where it was pretty good cash flow at the time. We're talking like between 5 and 15 grand cash flow per year because interest rates were so low.
Yeah.
Yep. So I actually built like a nice little passive income, which now if I still had it and was leveraged the same, obviously wouldn't be as nice, but I was getting close to like 50 grand, which actually was the nice little kick up the bum to leave engineering. Cause I'm like, oh, I'm sweet. Like got 50 grand. If I only earn 50 to 100 grand in this property kind of game, cool, happy days, I'll survive. Whereas I think if I had bought a principal place of residence that was negatively geared 30, 40 grand a year, whatever it was costing me to hold back then on a house, which is probably 400, 500 grand, probably wouldn't have taken the jump and actually went across to a new industry and to pay cut. So that's what I always tell people, like a passive income won't bring you happiness, but it'll let you explore things that maybe will bring you happiness.
Yeah. Money doesn't solve all your problems, but it does solve your money problems, right?
Money problems are still in your head. Like if you look at the wealth line, like everyone watching this is in the top 1% in the world. Like we're very wealthy. So it just changes. Yeah. What's my favorite quote is basically one way to get richer is lower your standards.
It's like Homer Simpson's the only way to is just to don't try hard at all. But yeah, this is a good point actually. Someone's jumped in the comments. Luke has love that Steve keeps the passive income about family choices and lifestyle, the important things in life. Can because you're just such a chilled dude. Like I know you very, very well outside of work and the podcast and stuff, but money it's very easy to just start chasing money and going after it. And you've got the opportunity to build a $50 million, $60 million passive income portfolio. And you could easily do that. Sorry, not passive income, but like growth portfolio that you could eventually turn into. Like, how do you keep the mindset?
I don't want to criticize the people doing, because I was that person. Like I was fanatical. And then when people say, oh, like even when I'm like, oh, I got a passive income of 50 grand, there was nothing passive about it. It was stand up till 2 a.m. researching properties for pretty much all day, every day. Like it was another job that you're not actually getting paid for per se. So there's nothing passive about it. And I went down, like I theoretically could have stopped at 2 or 3 properties and been happy and had a nice little life and an okay income being an engineer. So I got sucked in as well. But I actually found when I started getting to like probably number 7, 8, and 9, stuff like that, every time that I signed a new contract, I was actually getting kind of more stressed. I was like, oh, bloody hell, I got another property I got to worry about. Like the enjoyment was diminishing. And some people, you see it with a lot of buyers agents, they love the thrill and the accolades of like, oh, I got 10, I got 20, I got 30, I got 50, like, and that's okay. Like if that brings them joy, that's good. But I just found for me personally, I was getting more and more miserable every time I bought a property. It just seemed like another headache. And it wasn't changing my life. Like I was an engineer, like earning enough to live. You can still do everything you want. If you earn 150 grand, you can still travel the world and take holidays and have a cruisy life. So I was just like, cool, got to do something different. Got out of engineering, got into the buyer's agents when I was still a bit of an addict. But then once commercial came in, I was like, what am I doing?
You mean a property addict, Steve? Just to clarify, property addict, yeah?
Well, who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But ask about. Oh, look, he's got the Bundy. You go up to Bundy at Christmas.
I did. I went to Bundaberg Christmas. There we go. Bundaberg rum. There's no rum in it. That's just water.
So yeah, Joe was about to ask a cracking question, but Gurav, who's been on the show, he said, "How is your portfolio?" So share as much or as little. You can just share percentages, I suppose, between resi, commercial, and super. Because I think that's a really interesting kind of take. You're mostly probably commercial now, but what does it look like?
Yeah, I've still got a few resi, and I was talking to Joe before this about like I'll probably sell them off. Those ones are a bit of a harder one because they're granny flat potential. So I could chuck 180, 200 grand granny flat on and get 500, 550 bucks a week, which makes the yield getting close to commercial yields. Like it's not far off, like it's about 50%. So it's like, oh, cool, that's a nice little diversification. But they're in slightly low socioeconomic areas and the values aren't that high. So it's that headache of like, do I want the properties or not? At the start, obviously, it was 100%. Yeah, then I bought a couple commercial. And now it's, what's the percentage? Like 70% commercial. But I'd be okay with having 100% commercial. Like that's completely fine. Especially, which we'll talk about a little bit later, about where potentially principal place of residence fits into it and where my mindset's with that at the moment.
Yeah. And at what point did you make the shift from residential to commercial? Because the way I see property investing is there's kind of 3 lanes, right? There's 3 lanes to go about making this stuff happen. There is the slow lane, actually there's the nothing lane, right? There's continue on your life. Don't take the red pill or the blue pill. Just continue down the path and don't invest, right? Okay, now we're going to take the blue pill or whatever one is the matrix one. We're going to go, and we've got the slow lane, the fast lane, or the autobahn. The slow lane is just buy and hold residential property portfolio, right? You can in 20 to 30 years, and Steve, you've done it in 13, 15 years, you can build a residential portfolio that eventually starts off quite negative, very difficult and frustrating to hold over a period of time, but then it starts to shift and transfer. So you're really helping yourself in 20 years. Then there's, the fast lane. That's where you buy some properties and you build up that capital growth, and then you sell some and then buy some cash flow assets, like exactly like what Steve was talking about, granny flats, unit blocks, high cash flow residential properties. And then you keep some, hold some, sell some, and then pay down the debt that way. And then there's the other option, Steve, which you've gone, which is the autobahn way, which is focusing on high growth capital appreciation assets, like your set and forget type of properties that are going to grow in high growth areas. And then they do what they need to do, and then you sell them down, and then convert that into cash flowing assets. You're obviously at that transition point from going from the set and forgets to the transition. Like, how did you know, you know what, now's the time? This is the time. Was it a number? Was it an emotional state? Like, how did you get to that transition?
It's a mix of both. So the middle one, which you mentioned about keeping some resi, selling some off, or even just trying to refinance and slowly accumulate some high cash flow assets and extend out the period. Most people will do the sell one or two that have had, or like had their growth cycle, and then move it into a cash flow asset. People have got to remember, like, there's always devils in the detail. Like, I'm running a fairly successful buyer's agency, so I've got a fairly good income for that. If I was earning 150 grand as an engineer, I'd be doing lane 2, 100% lane 2, just to build it over. But I get to accelerate it because I'm earning good money in my business. So that's more than enough to live the life that I want. So this is just to simplify the life, which is kind of what I mentioned about the emotions part. Like, the numbers dictated the one I want to have that emotional stability. So it's a bit of both. But like I said, every time I was buying more properties, I was just getting more and more stressed about it. Whereas I love the liability. And like you mentioned, I've got a really low LVR at the moment. I'm like 40%, probably even less, 35% LVR at the moment. I could leverage it up and times my portfolio by 3. But then there's that weird kind of, people know when, like, you've seen it with the fear of, like, interest rates of, oh shit, if interest rates go up, I'm going to be really stressed and blah, blah, blah. That gets rid of all that. And I'm going to show you my spreadsheets. Like, interest rates have to go to like 13% before I even have to remotely dip into my own pocket for anything.
Maybe I'm just a maniac, but for me, it doesn't concern. And maybe I need to get to like $10 million of debt to worry about it. But I mean, it's just a number on a sheet. Like, I used to get concerned about it. But what I want to say, Steve, how do you think about
it? Is until it affects your lifestyle, which a lot of Aussies, it does. Like, if you're negatively geared, an interest rate change of 1 or 2% is debilitating. So, like, it's easy to say from me, from a position of wealth, that, oh yeah, what are you guys worrying about? Because it doesn't affect me in the same way as a mum and dad.
It also affects your lending a boatload, right? Like, if interest rates go from, like they have, 3% to 6% to 7%, great. The beautiful plans that I had laid out at 3% interest rates are just not going to happen anymore, because you haven't got the borrowing to be able to do it. So it's more of a patient wait and see kind of game, or adding value and creating and generating, 1, cash flow, and 2, capital by doing these extra value add pieces. But then that kind of, you can still achieve your slow lane approach and it will still get you the results. It's just going to be slower than the, shortened fast lane approach.
The point to note is, and I've mentioned this on the other episodes, is you still get the same capital growth with commercial. So the only actual thing that typical changes is the LVR. So you can still do this plan with commercial where you get the capital growth, you pull out the equity and you can go again. But for most people starting out, coming up with like a 30% deposit is a bit tough.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So on a 30% deposit on your one,
I did a 50%, which I'll go into.
It's a bit of a left field question that Daniel, and I want Daniel Musk, Elon's long lost cousin, maybe not. Daniel, I hope it's okay. But he asked, what state and suburbs can yield? This is a bit of left field. I would know the answer. So if you guys don't, I can answer.
Always the questions. Where do I buy? The one I was referring to, I've got one in Eagleby in Logan. The granny flats, brand new granny flats there, rent for $550.
And did you know I saw in WA in Secret Harbour the other day, $480 for a 1-bedroom granny flat. And I was like, and it was one of those, and it was a nice granny flat, but I was like, wow, for a 1-bedroom, that is just and must have been sort of close to the water. I just thought, so
I live on the Northern Beaches, Jeff, and you pay $900 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So it's all relative to the rent that's going in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about what's affordable for the demographic.
It's the same as the supply and the demand, like actual access to the property. Like, if you look at Logan, houses with granny flats sell so well. Like, they sell for so much more than they should do.
Easily 800,000 or 900,000, plus.
Yeah. Oh, way more now. Yeah. Well, not way more, but a little bit more. Anyway.
Depends on who's buying it. So what I want to say to Steve, because we were talking about sort of extra strategy, and Joseph was talking about these lanes. What I wanted to ask you is, because you've spoken about 5 or 6 different exit strategies, like, could you unpack for those who aren't familiar, like what exactly is an exit strategy, and what are at a high level, what do they look like? And then we'll start to dive into, well,
Yeah, and
do you build
how old are you, Steve?
How old am
younger than
I?
us, isn't he 28 or something?
This is getting, what do I identify as? I'm 38.
He is old, yeah. But no, so exit strategies. Tell us about that. What do they mean, and what are the kind of core ones that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I don't like the term exit because it seems like you're giving something up, but it's just the methods of approach of how you get to where you're going, and it's the shift in strategy. That's the exit. It's the exit from the initial strategy to the other one. Joe, I don't want to go in too long because I can rabbit on for that about now, but like he's kind of mentioned the three. It's either build the resi, live off the rent. Then each of those strategies has another strategy where, say you build your resi, you have your passive income, you can do a cash injection by selling one, and then you have your funds that way. And then that will flow on to the next one where you can then put those funds into something that might be high yielding to build that passive income. And you can sell all of them. You can keep some of them. You can refinance them. That's even a strategy where you refinance it, pull out the equity if you've got a good passive income. So it's just how you change the strategy to get to your final goal and how you stage that over time. I want to show you a quick, like, little simple spreadsheet just that I'd knocked up before, because this is a nice starting point, and it literally 30-second spreadsheet. So don't be impressed by it. Where is it? Cash purchase. Because this is a nice little way. Let me know once you can see it.
Well, you're sharing your entire. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So all I'm doing is this cash and a yield. So a net yield. Like the reason it's like commercial is because it's effectively a net yield, but that could just be a savings account or whatever it is. But like $1 million, and like it's pretty simple maths. Obviously, 2% yields, 20 grand a year. And if you're just trying to picture, like, if I wanted to buy commercial and I wanted to do it cash, how do I get a passive income? And like most of the stuff we're buying is kind of 5 to 7%. So if you can get $1 million cash, you can have a $60,000 passive income from a commercial, from a bank, shares, whatever it may be. And then obviously if you get 2 million, and people will say $1 million a lot of money, and it is, but not once you've got a few properties. Like if you buy, I don't know, a couple of 500 grand properties and they double in value over 7-8 years, you've got your $1 million. Don't come at me with all those tax people being like, oh, what are a couple of games? Just general numbers. You can then get, okay, cool, I'm going to have a $60,000. I like property because it's indexed with inflation, so you're not kind of getting poorer with it, and go from there. But then what we'll go into with my one is, if say you've got 3 million and you want to split that up into 2 assets with 1.5 and then leverage, we can make this passive income about the same, but in 5-7 years time, it's going to be 3 times the passive income. And we'll go into that a bit later, but I just thought this is always a good little starting point of, like, if I want to get to a certain cash flow and I just want to simplify it, how much equity would I need in my resi portfolio? And then we can start talking the commercial strategy after that.
Yeah, nice. I'll ask this now because for those, there'll be probably people screaming that, but what about the risk, Steve? What about the risk? Could you unpack what do those risks look like in commercial? We have done a little bit, but I just want to know for those who, because
that's one of my concerns. Like when I think about shopping centers, I think car parks, right? That's why I mentioned it at the outset. Like you need to replace a new car park. What's that? 200, 300 grand for a new one? Like, how do you think about, well, one, the risks, but my biggest risk is big expense, like massive.
I think you're thinking like big underground car park, which mine's not.
Well, I mean, how much is a bitumen car park? Surely 100 grand.
Yeah, probably 100, 150 grand. But if you buy a block of apartments that has 8 car spots, there's 60 grand there. So it's all relative to the kind of price. But it's there. But I'm actually going to go into that. So that's also why I paid a little bit of a premium for mine, because the car park.
You overpaid. What kind of bloody buyer's agent overpays for an asset? Yeah, and it wasn't just a small overpayment. I think what was it? How much was it? 100 grand?
That was 75K.
75K.
Which seems like a lot, but 75K on 2%, 3.175 is 2.3%. So it'd be like me buying $1 million house for $1,023,000. Like, that doesn't seem that crazy in the grand scheme of things. But I did it for a few reasons. And I'll save that for the chat of why I like that property and why I was happy to pay a little bit of a premium and things like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of reasons why it's worthwhile paying for a little bit more, right? Yeah.
But your question, Jeff, risk with commercial. I want to point out, though, the risk with resi at the moment is you're buying negatively geared assets where you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if interest rates go up. That's not as big a deal with commercial. The obvious ones are vacancy, because resi, you lose your tenant, you fill it reasonably quickly. Commercial, you lose it where if you buy a bad one, years at a time. But most of the stuff we buy is kind of like a 1 to 6 months vacancy. That's probably the biggest risk. And then the individual risk lies in what you're buying. The shopping center's got a bit more risk than a warehouse. Like I mentioned before, warehouse is just concrete and a roller door. Office space has probably got to do with the building itself and the body corporate, if there's structural defects and things like that. And obviously vacancy is at about 15 to 17% at the moment in most capital cities. But that's the biggest risk you end up wrong, is buying an asset that doesn't have a tenant, which every resi investor is what they say. Oh, you're going to sit there vacant. I saw this cafe that went vacant for 3-4 years. Cool. They bought the wrong asset. I've seen lots of mining towns that go down in residential and high density apartments that have structural issues and high vacancy rate. Like there's always this, you just got to make sure you don't do something silly in it, which is why, Joe, I overpaid and I bought in an area that I know is always going to have tenants.
Yeah, nice. I wanted to talk to, because regarding capital growth, because we're diving a little bit all over the place, and we'll bring it back to how to actually build, how you built this. But does commercial and resi track together? For example, Perth's resi had over 20% growth. How's the commercial been? I think commercial's done relatively well. I think it's getting closer, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's go 3 years ago plus. So back longer than 3 years ago. Typically, they were out of sync a little bit. So like the resi would grow, then commercial would grow, which is where the myth came from that they didn't grow in the first place, but they were just kind of happening out of cycle. They do have to grow the same, because otherwise, why is commercial more expensive than residential? How to get more expensive if it's not growing the same?
Yeah.
The last 3 years, 4 years since COVID, they've kind of gone similar. I've seen a little bit of a lag though, normally. So normally the resi market goes, then the commercial. The main driver behind that is you can't change the rent instantly in commercial. Resi, they'll pump up rents and things like that. Commercial, you're still stuck in the lease. So you're normally 2 or 3 years later for it to go. But Perth commercials, gangbusters at the moment. I think we're going to see another 20% growth this year.
Interesting, because I read there was a comment saying that there's some vacancies, some Palise coming up in Perth. So maybe it's specific based on the area, but
stupid, isn't it? Like, 20% drop. It's like, well, where? Like, it's so specific. It's like, oh, rents are going up or rents are going down. It's like, just maybe for industrial units in this area that's oversupplied with industrial units. Yeah.
And on the whole, they're actually right. The vacancies have climbed a little bit. Like some of the suburbs we're buying in during like 12 months ago, like 18 months ago, you lose your tenant, you fill it straight away, like literally within a couple of weeks. And now it's like 1 month, 2 months. But like in the grand scheme of things, when you're buying an asset that's renting for 60 grand and it has 1 or 2 months vacancy, it's 50 grand that year, then you go back to 60 grand. So it does change, and different types will be more susceptible to the economy, obviously. But so is resi. People just don't talk about that because it's not changing the cash flow.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of resi vacancy rates, I'm starting to actually see a bit of an uptick generally overall as vacancy over the Christmas period. Obviously, there was higher vacancies, but I'm starting to see a little bit continue. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. So you definitely have to keep as a residential investor, you do have to keep your eye on the vacancy rates, because that's lost rent. And that's such a great point that you made, Steve, right at the outset. Was I overpaid $70,000. I paid 2.4% for this thing. But the reason why I did that was because I wanted to get more rent in. I wanted to ensure that I've secured the rent, because a 6 months vacancy on a $200,000 unit is on a $200,000 complex is $100,000. So great. Spend $70,000 less, get an asset that's going to have a vacancy for 6 months, and then there's your $100,000 there.
It's one of those ones where like most buyers agents will really focus on what the numbers are now. When you're buying commercial, you need to focus on what the numbers are going to be. So like I actually don't care what the vacancy rate's now. When I look at an asset, we're not buying this for 1 year. We're going to have some bad periods. We're going to have Trump will get elected. We'll have world wars. There'll be recessions. There'll be supply chain issues. There's going to be stuff that happens. There's going to be stuff that happens in the next 10 years. So that's why I look at, okay, if I'm getting this population growth, is there going to be more demand for this asset? And like, that's simple to do if you're buying well-established areas and hard to do if you're buying regional. If I'm buying a warehouse in a regional town and there's a lot of green around it, I have no idea in 10 years' time what's that going to look like. I grew up in Western Sydney and Kellyville didn't exist. The Hills District pretty much wasn't there. Now you go there and it's own little city kind of thing, like it's filled out. But that's what you look at. And I like buying in the well-established area. So if I buy a warehouse completely surrounded by residential and there's truckloads of applications where they're doing developments of building more high-density apartments, and the council's approximating in the next 15 years, there's going to be 20, 30% more people. I'm like, cool. They're not building any warehouses. I'm just going to have 20, 30% more people. Warehouse space should be in more demand then. Like that's the thing. And we're going to have those ebbs and flows, but you got to have that long-term mindset. I'm yet to meet anyone to be able to predict the market that well.
Is there a like a price range that is more ideal? So like this one, because I know you, Steve, you love buying property. Actually, by the sound of this, you don't actually love owning the property. But you could have bought a $3 million property, which you have done, a 3.17 or whatever it was, or you could have bought a $6 million property, or you could have bought a couple of $1 million properties. Like, how do you think about price range in commercial? How do you frame that?
It's tough because my grand plan is, and I'll go into a bit later, is I'm probably going to buy another $3-4 million asset. So I had enough to obviously like just get one bigger one, which has their own bonuses. Like I was looking at like a pet barn in Newcastle that had a 10-year lease, and I was like, well, that was about $6 million. And I was like, well, this is pretty good. But again, if I lose it and there's a vacancy for 6, 12, 18 months, and I need that cash flow at that point in time for repayments on a principal place of residence, or I'm traveling or living overseas or whatever, that brings on more stress. So my budget was it was a little bit flexible. I was kind of looking in the 2 to 4 mil price point, and I'll do that again just to kind of see what comes up, because the annoying thing with commercial, like resi is pretty simple. If you go in a house, like the price tag just changes based on the suburb and how nice the house is. Commercial, like there's in Newcastle at the moment for $6 million, there's a Guzman Gomez with a 20-year lease that just got posted today. So you can buy stuff like that. So there's all that type of stuff, and then you've got multi-tenancy industry, you've got little shopping centers, you've got a whole office block. Like, so it's more to do with the deal.
Does the yield change based on the price? Like a $6 million asset, like is that at a 7% yield or a 4% yield? Like,
no, sometimes it's actually lower, but it depends what asset you're looking at. Like the pet barns and the Guzman Gomez I just mentioned, they're kind of like 4.5 to 5.2%. Whereas I bought mine at kind of like 6. But you guaranteed the rent. Like as long as you've got a good guarantee on it, like the pet barn will be there for 10 years. The Guzman Gomez on a 20-year lease, like it's a nice little secure kind of way. And like I'm a buyer's agent. Like I buy 6.5% yielding stuff for clients regularly. But for me, changing that dial and getting that extra kind of 15 grand a year, not really going to change anything. So I'm like, okay, let's just get the set and forget type one. It will in regards to some types of properties, some locations. The asset class is normally the biggest one. Like you'll get a bit more for retail than you will for industrial in the same suburb, and you'll get a lot higher yield for office space for obvious reasons in the same suburb.
High risk generally. You sound a bit arrogant there, Steve, but that's all right. You've said before that you are.
I'll quickly jump in. Someone wrote the comment about like how I overpaid, and that's a good thing because there's lots of buyers. That's exactly right. There was multiple offers on contracts. There was 4 offers on contracts. One of them actually was a higher price than mine, but it had conditions on it. It had like set due diligence and finance clauses. And because I was getting lease stock and I knew I was going to get the finance to fine, I did all my DD up front and then just went unconditional. So I knew I was buying a good asset.
Sorry, mate. Go. I
can't remember what I was saying.
Sorry, cut you off. What I was going to say is, how do you know that there was those other offers, right? Like you're dealing with a real estate agent. There's one at 3.1, there's one at 3.1, there's one at 3.2 or 3 at the higher shitty terms. Like, how'd you figure that stuff out?
Fortunately for me, I'm friends now with the agents, so they tell me how it is. So I don't know. I could be bluffing and he could be watching this, laughing himself all the way to the bathroom kind of thing, being like, what an idiot. But I'm fairly confident it is, because there was like a lot of back and forth there.
Okay.
But again, it doesn't matter anyway. I based it on what I was willing to pay, and that's the most important thing.
And I
Yeah.
think there's always going to be that unknown, because you can sort of, the more detail in their response, it's more likely that they're not lying. I mean, that's if they're just saying yes, it's true. Then I don't know, like then maybe there's a bit of not so much of a kernel. That's something that Scott said.
One of the things, but it's not actually going to change my life. Whether I bought it for 3.1 or 3.2 doesn't change the dial that much. When we do the forecasting, it's changing like by five grand a year cash flow. And like a better quality asset anyway at a slightly higher price will get more rental increases and far outweigh that extra 5 grand a year anyway.
Yeah. So I want to take us back. So this is where I wanted to take the conversation. I think this is where how we build that 250K passive income commercial from scratch. So I have not told this person to ask this question, but Daniel Musk has said, I just got 250K cash out from equity but not sure what to do with it because I already own a few resi. Should I go commercial? So what are the kind of criteria or questions that people should meet before they kind of go down that commercial path?
Yeah, so this is probably the most common scenario we get from investors. They have 2 to 5 resis. Cool, they want to go commercial. I've said it on this podcast quite a few times. So it always comes down to what you're trying to achieve. What time frame do you want to do it in? What do you have for finance? So finance is normally what dictates it for most normal investors in a high interest rate environment. So most resi guys have got 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. The banks aren't touching them anymore. They're done. They can't buy resi. So they'll have to sell and try to buy another one, which will get more growth, or do something a bit more creative there, sell and buy a cash flow one. Commercial, because the lease stock loans, if you can got enough servicing to get that deposit out, you can then buy a commercial. So 250 will get them kind of like a 700 to 900K, depending on whether they go 70, 80% LVR, commercial asset. So the finance has dictated that. If their goal was to keep expanding their portfolio, they have to buy a commercial or something like that, or do a development or something like that, like you guys are doing, a bit of a
or
kind of
put
a
a
side
granny flat on their asset, which will increase their cash flow.
It still probably won't get them into the next property though. It'll increase their cash flow, but they're still waiting till they get more servicing. Like it might increase their servicing by an extra rent by an extra 150 grand, but that's not going to be enough to get them another property. So the finance is normally what dictates it. Where you see a spectrum though is like you get a lot of people where they're high income business owners, or they're a tradie that doesn't actually show any income and they can't have servicing, things like that. So it'll depend on that. And then it'll also depend on age and what they're trying to achieve. So a 60-year-old who comes to me, like, why am I buying them negatively geared asset? That's not giving them passive income, not helping him retire. 20-year-old, it's no, you keep going to the bank while they keep giving you money and you've got bank of mum and dad to fall back on. You leverage up to the eyeballs if you want to be aggressive. And then there's mum and dad investors that just want tidy little passive 25K just to help out so they can work part-time, spend more time with the kids, and then a really low risk commercial might be the right option. So to answer his question, finance first. I always talk to the broker, get them to assess my residential capacity and commercial capacity, and then see if there's any differentiation between them. If they come back and say, oh, with that 250, we can get you $1 million residential on an 80% loan, cool, happy days. If we can only get, say, a 700 or 600K commercial, cool, there's still some gas in the tank. If we don't need the passive income now, let's use it. I've had plenty of times where the commercial comes back at 750 and the resi comes back at 0. So cool. Then you're going down that route if you want to be aggressive.
And I guess it's really just an extra question that you need to be asking along the journey of purchasing a property, right? You just need to keep asking questions of your broker. Like the broker is one of the key people in your little A team, and it's, how much cash can I borrow? How much borrowing? How much cash do I need to be making? Like that was one of the things when I joined a tech company, they're like, we're going to pay you in shares, we're going to pay you commission, you're going to be on a really low salary base. And as a property investor at that time, I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not. I don't want any of your shares. I don't want any commission. I just need a big salary because that's what's going to allow me to get into the banks, for the banks to love me and then get into that next property. But it's doing those little tricks at work. Hey, I need a raise. Hey, I need a raise. And then going to the broker and saying, how much can I borrow? But asking a commercial, how do you know if you've got a good commercial broker. Like, not a lot of brokers are good at commercial. Is this something you have to specifically search out for, or does a normal everyday resi broker say, hey, can you look at commercial for me? And they can.
Yeah. So most resi brokers, I know you know the answer to this, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Most resi brokers will say they can, but they're not going to be as good as a commercial broker. The exact same as not all resi brokers are created equally as well. There's ones that are really good at investing and understand the strategy, and then there's the ones that write principal place of residence loans all day, every day. So commercial one, as you've done when you've done the broker chats and stuff, is just ask them how many commercial deals they've done, or find an investor that has lots of commercial properties, or ask someone like me. I've got a handful of that I recommend out to that are based on personal circumstances and the type of person they are, the most suited kind of broker there. And then, just make sure they got runs on the board and they know what you're trying to achieve. But you mentioned as well about before, like with the planning, I actually had my last sales call today where we did a strategy session. It was a married couple, and they were talking about, like, they already got a nice little portfolio, 5 properties. They're like, oh, we really want to buy a principal place of residence, but like, we know we need commercial. And I was like, why do you want to buy a principal place of residence then? They're like, oh, make us happy. And I was like, there's your strategy. Go out, buy the principal place of residence. Like, the commercial's not going to make you happy. We're just pushing that carrot 5 years down the track. So why are you going to be miserable for 5 years? Just go do it. We'll reassess in 5 years' time.
What kind of, on that point about the PPR versus buying more investments, whether it be commercial or resi, what kind of, because you're in that sort of space yourself a little bit as well, like you're considering that. How do you kind of think about, because for me, I love rent investing, but how do you sort of separate needs from wants? Because of course I want my PPR, but I need to be financially free. Like, how do you kind of think about that equation?
There's logic brain and there's emotional brain. And there's actually no right answer, as I sort of mentioned with that sales call that I had. Like, the emotional one has to be there. Otherwise, what's the point of all this? Like, all three of us are quite wealthy now through property. Like, we've got enough. We're going to be okay with retirement if we just keep going the way we're going. So you balance that. But I'll talk my strategy, because that's the kind of point of the podcast. Is the way I figured it is, if I get 100K passive income from this one, and then I'm buying another one, like, I've got a good budget for a house. We've got, like, in that kind of 4 to 7 mil principal place of residence budget. Like, it's a nice tidy budget. But by doing this strategy, I'm going to have a couple $100,000 passive income, which can then pay my mortgage for that. So all of a sudden I've got double. And the way commercial works is my business income and my personal income is the cherry on top to either pay down the commercial, spend life. So now I've got the two, which is the same premise for most rent vesting for the smaller stuff with the resi. They buy the 2 to 3 resis with the goal of buying the principal place down the track. But this way I kind of get the best of both worlds. I'm going to get my little dream mansion, and I'm also going to have the passive income with it as well. And I'll show you guys, like, the property will pay itself off in like 7 years, the commercial. And then with just small rental increase, I think it's about 150 grand it'll be in 7 years. So you buy 2 of them, it's 300 grand passive income in 7 years I've got.
What LVR were you buying that? I
bought it at 50%. Yeah. So I had a few mil. So I was doing 1.5 mil kind of deposits, because I sold most of the resi portfolio. But I can leverage up. If I leveraged that to 70%, which I could have, and Joe alluded to it, and bought 9 mil worth of commercial, or I was at 7.5, 8 mil, quite easily. Actually, more. Yeah, 9 mil worth of commercial. I will have a much, much, much bigger passive income in 10, 15 years. But less
you have to wait 10 or 15 years.
That's right. If you leverage up to 70, 80%, your passive income is pretty much neutral. You're just waiting for rental increases, interest rates to come down. I don't want that. Last night, me and my partner sat down for an hour and planned out the year. Like, we're going to Vietnam in April. We're going to Europe for 3 months in August. Like, we do all that. Like, that disappears if you're neutrally geared.
So, yeah, I think this is pretty exciting for... I mean, it sounds like it's a little far out there, to be honest. When you think of like going back
I know Jeff joked about me being arrogant, and like I don't want to sound flippant that like a couple mil is like chump changes. But in the grand scheme of things, if you've got a long mindset and it's like a 15-year plan, like to get a couple mil, you only need 3 kind of like 700K assets. And I know that's tough to do at the start. Like, don't get me wrong, I've slaved away multiple jobs. I've done the hard yards. And then if the problem just got to double. So you just got to get through one cycle, and then that possibility is there for you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like, I feel like we're talking about the end state, and we haven't gone through the shit that you've had to fight through to be able to get here, and how much you've had to work your ass off. But we've kind of covered that in past podcasts. So if you do want to listen to Steve's podcast, go like his story, go back into the times. What I'm interested in now is like, I want to see this. I want to see the numbers of this thing, because yes, you've paid a 50% LVR. But we do have to jump to an ad break. We will do that, and then we'll jump into the actual spreadsheet, the real world numbers. How can we pay this? How can you pay this thing off? Get this positively. Well, it already is positive. That's the crazy thing. It's already positive cash flow. Now it's just going to keep paying itself off.
And you'll be amazed what interest rate it has to go to for it to be kind of even neutral. So definitely stay tuned to check out this spreadsheet. I want to see it now. Come on.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yields, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Palise of Palise Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia, and not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
It's actually free still, isn't it, Steve? Have you changed that yet? You can get
No, it's still free.
Okay.
You
Still
guys
free.
should see the ad on. You should see the ad I'm working on for the next few weeks. You are gonna love it.
Oh, jeez.
Is it professional? No, but who cares?
The
I
numbers,
just
Steve.
bought
I want to see
my
I
forever
wanna see the
property. You bought my forever property. I don't care anymore. I remember your first ad for the book was just you sitting in a hammock surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of books. And I was like, yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. Going back to this deal. One of the questions actually that has popped up, because I want to bring the commercial story back down to kind of reality, because we all can't afford a $3 million property that's commercial and cash flow positive. Jake's jumped in here and he said, can we get a cash flow positive commercial property for $450,000? So is there like because even a 30% deposit on $450,000 is not an incredible amount of money. Like how do we think about this?
Yeah, so I want to point out that there's multiple lenders now doing 80%. I just talk 70% because I find if I say 80%, I get too many haters being like, oh no, it's 70%. So like you can get 80%. So you can still leverage up. If you're buying if you're buying your resi portfolio anyway at 80%, it's the same borrowing capacity anyway. The yields don't change that much whether you're buying a $500K or $1 million. So yes, you can still get a passive income, but obviously it's going to be less than half of that of $1 million one. But there's still good assets. Like my brother just bought a little $500K one in Brisbane. I think it was a 7.5% net yield. So he's getting he did it cash as well. So he's what's that? 32 grand passive income just from that property. Actually more, 35 grand.
Yep, 35 roughly.
Yeah. So you can buy.
He paid full cash for it.
Through like he's
100% cash.
he's weirdo. He paid off his house. He bought a 320 grand house in Western Sydney 15 years ago and paid it away, and then he's built up savings. He's actually, you think I'm risk adverse. He is the opposite. He also runs our DD department and runs the due diligence thing. So he's very, very risk adverse, which is fine. He's got 3 kids, 4th kid coming on the way, house paid off, good income through work, nice little passive income. Buy 1, 2, 3 of those. Cool. He's got a very secure $100,000 passive income that way. So just kind of we look at it, but can't remember what I was saying. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So $500,000 commercial.
Yep. You can
properties
still
do
get
exist.
one. Yep, they do exist. Just don't expect to get like a 5-year tenant kind of thing. It's going to be very small, like electrician or like panel beater, or whatever it may be. They're going to come and go quite regularly, and they're not going to sign big long leases with secure guarantees on the lease. They're going to be 12 months, 24 months. You're probably going to get a new tenant every 3 to 5 years. Good thing is in some areas, the vacancies are really tight. You fill them in like a month and you go again. But that also wipes out one of the benefits of commercial, which is lease stock. If you're buying a 500K, you're not getting something on a 3, 4, 5 year lease so you can get a lease stock loan. You'll have to do it through servicing. So then it starts to become a bit of a harder argument of like, okay, I'm not doing this for finance. I'm doing this because I want to buy and build a cash flow.
Okay, great. Sorry, just a bit of a random question that jumped out there. If anyone has any other questions, because I do want to jump to some great ones, because this whole thing just sounds a little bit, I don't know, it's awesome to see that you've achieved the end state, but there's so many challenges along the way. So anyone that's got questions about the challenges or what it looks like, chuck them in there.
I've got a question, because it was one of my questions. I want to know what along the way, Steve. So these 13 years that what were the potholes? What were the things that you wish you could have done a bit better in your journey?
Okay. The biggest probably takeaway is I chased cash flow too early. So that was my biggest one. I was buying really regionally, the stupidly high cash flow stuff that didn't grow. And back then, finance was the easier game. Like it wasn't like it is now. You could pretty much, if you had the equity, you could go again. So why was I trying to get like a $5,000 extra passive income from the property when I could have bought a better growth asset that would have grown 30, 40 grand a year? And that would have gave me much bigger. So chasing cash flow too soon is the most detrimental. That was probably the biggest one. And then the other one was just emotional life circumstance. Okay.
Yeah, I want to talk to that a little bit more. I don't really have a great question to ask around it, but I think that this is where I see a lot of people, like that person that just said, can I get a great $450,000 cash flow positive asset? Like, is that actually the best move? Like, if let's just say you're young, this is the first purchase that you're making, and let's say you've saved a little bit of cash, but you're going to be still working for the next 20, 30 years. And you're not really, like, for me, it's like, do I need an extra $200 a week in rent? No, in no way, shape or form do I need this money. Can I lose $200? Yes, absolutely. If it's going to be, for me, it's like, what is this portfolio going to be worth in 10 years time? Whereas Steve, you're already at that 10 years time, and now it's to convert value that you've created. So you're saying that if you started looking at cash flow straight away, and that was, not ideal.
Well, my guess is that question for the 451 is that's probably their borrowing capacity. Whereas if they've still got some gas in the tank with servicing, and they could extend that to say 900 because they can get a 90% loan to value ratio. Yes, that's going to be $5,000 a year negative, whereas the commercial might be $5,000 a year positive. But go do some contract work for a week in your holidays, or pack shelves at Coles one weekend a month or whatever. Make up that $5,000. If you get capital growth, you're making heaps more. You're making on a $900,000 asset at 5-6%. You're making like 30, 40 grand. You've made it up. Like you're okay. So I really chased cash flow way too hard because the people I was following at the time were buying the slummy properties in the really regional towns, just focused on that. But as you guys have experienced as well, we all do things we shouldn't. You keep getting educated. I'm still learning things today, and you'll probably have me on in 5 years' time, and I'll be spewing a different strategy.
Yeah, I like how you just. I like lots of things, but I like how you said there, and remind me of don't let your lack of resources stop you from being resourceful, because you sort of said there, you've got you got instead of buying that sort of 450K, buy that 900, and you'll get that greater potential capital growth. And Carolyn's asked a great question. She said, "What is too soon to chase cash flow in your view? If someone has paid off their home, is that the time to start chasing cash flow, or is it case by case, Steve? As Steve-ism come back."
The time to start chasing cash flow is when you actually need the cash flow or want the cash flow to change your life. So if you're just trying to get cash flow for the sake of getting cash flow, cool. You're going to pay tax on that. Like, what's the point? Like, if you're not using it, cool. Probably better off buying a lower risk asset that's neutrally geared and worry about it when you actually do need the money. And that's where personal circumstance comes into it so much. So like, my life's not changing now because of it. Someone on a low income might be changing.
Yeah, so we had a podcast with a guy named Richard Morgan, and he built development. He's been absolutely compounding his net wealth, and we interviewed him, and he's absolutely crushing it. Good on him. And one of the questions I posed to him was like, actually, why aren't you doing commercial? Like, why are you not in the commercial game? Like, you've got so much capital here and so much money. And he said, I'm still young. Like, at any one point in time, exactly like what Steve's doing, I can sell down my entire property portfolio of residential and convert that into value, into that commercial property, and then have that cash flow. But it's only up until the point of which I need to be able to do that. Like, he wants to compound at a higher growth rate by doing divisions and developments. So why not compound at 15% instead of compounding at whatever commercial is going to give you that 6%? And I thought that was quite interesting. That's a different way of thinking about property investing.
It's the same way I think about it. He's 100% right. You do it when you need to do it. And if he's enjoying doing the developments and still young and loving and really hungry, I'm not. Like, you know me, Joe. I work 10 till 4 each day, 4 days a week. Like, I want the fun stuff. Like, that's what nourishes me. Like, someone mentioned in one of the first comments about like friends, family, like lovers, like travel. Like, I'm in that stage of my life now. I don't want to be on site and monitoring developments at 6 a.m. and headaches and delays and builders costs and blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to simplify and remove all that so I can actually focus on my happiness, not the other stuff.
And life is actually can be super short. Like, I've seen over the last, I mean, not to get all morbid, but over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, you just see like people that are sort of our age, just you hear through the grapevine or through Facebook these days, and you're like, wow, like that's crazy that's happened. But anyway, I'm going to get back to, so we promised spreadsheets and the numbers. So Steve, give us what you unpack some of these core numbers as to how we get to that 150, what it looks like. And I wanted to know, and we'll talk to this once we get to it, but I want to know how quickly somebody could do it. Just, can we do it in like 5 years, or can we do it, what's the speed?
All right, how about do you want to do the numbers first? I'm going to quickly just show like the commercial property that I bought, just so they get
we haven't even seen this bloody
thing.
Let's see the thing first. Sorry.
I was going to save the thing till the end, but let's,
no, it'll just give a bit more perspective because it'll make it kind of real, I suppose. Let me share.
It is.
All right. Let me just zoom in. There it is. So full disclosure, Regents Park, you can look it up. It's in the Logan area, kind of southwest kind of part of Logan. 8 tenants. And this is what I was talking about, Joe, about the big car park. So we've got a big land component. I can buy in Brisbane. So retail typically goes for like this at 6.5% net. This is a 6%, but normally the site's more utilized. So like the ones you get for 6.5 don't have this big block of land. They just have the car parks out the front. You know, the ones that are they're normally in a straight line where they just got like the ones out the front that are perpendicular. That's it. They don't have the land component. Where this has got a huge land component, which is good.
Can you put more commercial on here?
I haven't actually looked at that. I looked at the resi, whether you could put another residential on top, which you can, or do a major resi development. The knocking it down is a hard one because you're kind of knocking it down, not getting any rent from the commercial tenants to then build a bigger commercial, which you probably could, but you're not going to get a town planner give you kind of confirmation on that until you actually do the application. But just typical mix of tenants. I'll be full disclosure as well. So like, I'm actually not renewing the tobacconist's lease.
The vape shop.
because insurance premiums are going through the roof. Pretty much every insurer has pulled out of doing vape shops. And there's only 2 left. And it's like 15, 20 grand for insurance, but they give me 30 grand rent. So it's becoming like uneconomical. So I'm replacing that with the medical, with the GP, which is good. So happy days.
What's the reason? What's the reason? Is just because it's more risk, or that they'll go bankrupt?
This is why there's more GPs needed, because vapes aren't that great for you. So
no, full disclaimer, don't sue me here and quote me on this. There's a couple of reasons why insurers don't like it. First one is effectively their money laundering, and insurers can't be seen to do anything that's got to do with money laundering. So they're out. They're not allowed to pay out insurance if it's to criminal organizations. The other one is a lot of them are actually getting like firebombed and stuff like that. So none of them want to take on the actual risk of having, especially in this one. If this one gets bombed and it takes out half the building, like that's a big thing. So that's the general background of it. Personally, I've got personal reasons. I actually don't like them as well. Like I think they're bad for culture and things like that. But what I was going to show you is, and why I like it, there's no other.
It's amazing. It's amazing how much the ethics come in when it doesn't financially make sense as well.
Yeah, but like actually funny. I actually own another property that's a vape shop, so I actually am. I need to correct myself. I'm an idiot. So, but there's no other retail in like a 1.5 kilometer radius. So I've got a very big zone of 7 square kilometers where it's just residential. This is all, and this is why vacancy rates are tight. Then I've also got the security that there's a major kindergarten next door, and then there's a major state school across the road. So you're always going to have some form of foot traffic and road traffic. The one in the same suburb that actually sold, it's about 6.5%. I think it was 2 years ago. That was on a main road, and that was the one I was talking about. It didn't have the land area, but it actually had more cars going past per day. So it had more exposure. So like this is the hard thing with commercial as well. But that's the general kind of crux. What I like is like, cool, I can build up. I've got 3,500 square meters. These houses have been selling between 850 and 950 in the last couple of years. So I was like, okay, if I break this down into 500 square meter lots, cool. That gives me 7 square 100 meter lots. I can probably sell at 500 grand a pop. Cool, happy days. It's a nice little exit strategy if I want to do that as well. But in reality, I'm probably just going to let this kind of tick along. I probably won't go into the other stuff. It's all about the net level area and stuff like that. But let's maybe have a look at some spreadsheets. So let's have a look at the cash flow. All right. So can you guys still see the screen?
Yeah. So this is how you build the 150K passive income commercial. I suppose it's have a lot of cash or build a resi apparently.
So this is just doing snapshot of today's cash flow. We'll go into the pay down at the moment. So I'll leave it interest only just to show. 3.175. I actually get around 200 grand rent, but I'm allowing kind of a bit because like the last few years, there's always been something pop up, which we'll talk about at the start about little things that weren't covered under insurance and things like that. So I was trying to be a bit more conservative in my numbers. Around a 6% yield. They all got increases as well. So that with 3 to 5% rental increases, that becomes like 210 within a couple of years anyway. Good depreciation, get 28 grand a year cash depreciation on it, which is cool. Interest rate, I got a lease stock loan at 50% with, who did I go with? ANZ on this one. So yeah, 6.5% is what I'm getting. So it's 50% LVR. What I want to show here is looking at how the interest rates change. So if interest rates go up, if interest rates go down, just so you can get an idea of like potentially what the cash flow is going to look like. And you can actually see over here. So
a what if scenario.
Yeah. So I always look for 10 years. I'm not buying now. That's why I don't care if the interest rates are high, interest rates are low. I only care for stress testing my portfolio. Like it's not going to change my strategy unless I see an opportunity. But 90% of people, they're like, oh, going to wait for interest rates, yada, yada. You rarely meet a wealthy person who does that. Most just do it nice and steady, the Warren Buffett style. But so you can see on the 1.5 mil, we're looking at 100K per annum interest. And then the cash flow left over is around 108 with the depreciation. So if I get capital gains, and I've done that basically at 5%, which is pretty conservative average for 30 years, I'm then making 266 grand a year from it. And we mentioned before about I could have went out with my 1.5 mil cash and bought a 1.5 mil asset. But like Richard Morgan, I'm still young. I still want to leverage a little bit. I don't want to be completely kind of cashed out. So the two parts is I'm going to increase my cash flow by being more leveraged in 10 years time. And I'm also going to get compound effect on that leverage and make. So 266 grand a year net's pretty good if I get that cash flow. This is what Jeff mentioned. For me to actually turn negative, I need to pretty much be at 13% interest rates. So I can hold this property through a lot of storms effectively. And that's kind of what I liked about this property. 8 tenants, low risk. Also why I've done a big deposit. If I had done 70 or 80% LVR, which I could have, this number, the cash flow is neutral. And if that goes to 12%, I'm stuffed. I'm like 200, 300 grand a year negative. So I'm doing this a very conservative way, even though with my business and personal income, I probably could leverage it up and paid it and handled that risk, but I don't need that passive income. Like having a 500 or 700 or 800 is not changing anything. I just want the sleep at night factor. And this is where we go into the pay down one. So this is where it kind of gets cool and where the leverage part kind of works out. So this is not even monthly repayments. I just do this per year. All I'm doing on this one is working out like before, the interest on the 1.587 that I borrowed. It's got 87K cash flow on this one because I'm not taking into account depreciation, which will hopefully kind of cancel out a little bit the people that are saying, oh, what about tax on that? Because it was 22 grand or whatever it was. And then all I'm doing is taking off the $87,000 from the debt. So initially it's 1.58 after the first year. And because I don't need the income now, similar to Richard Morgan, like I don't need it now. So I can actually just let it while business is going well and I've got that cash to support my like travel lifestyle. Cool. Just let this tick along. So you can actually see.
So you're going to do principal and interest, are you, on this one instead of interest only?
I got a lease doc loan on this one, and that's a good question. I'll reassess based on my next deal of whether I refinance and how I do that. Same net result, whether I'm putting like the cash flow in an offset account or I'm doing principal and interest and things like that. But like that, I've done this. That's why I do this yearly, just because it keeps it simple. I find I get too many questions if you start going, oh, what if interest only? What if I do P&I? This is just, it actually happens a bit quicker than this. If you obviously do monthly repayments, you'll knock it off by about 5-10% because you are chipping away obviously quicker because you're not paying interest on per year. Being C, year 8, debt is gone. And what have I done for rental increases on this? 5% rental increases, which most of them have at the moment. 245K passive income, done, dusted, zero debt. So buy 2 of these, $500,000 passive income.
That's plowing all cash flow into the debt.
All cash flow into the debt, which I can do at this point in time because like I'm earning income with work, which is enough to sustain my lifestyle. So if I just work for another 5-10 years, I'm going to have just from this and from another property, $500,000 passive income. And as you know, Joe, I've got quite a few other assets as well, which give me nice little passive income. So this is a very simple way for me to get $500,000 a year just with 2 assets in a fairly low risk style. And I've mentioned before, I'm going to buy like a industrial complex or something like that for the next one with multiple tenants. But you go back to your guys' plan about making 150K, like this is a pretty damn nice way to get like a 250 grand passive income in sub 10 years. What else do I have any other spreadsheets?
Are we taking notes, though? We're probably taking notes.
Yeah, well, that's the point I wanted to make is we're now, because like this has been super inspirational for me, and I hope people have taken that away of being like I hope it's just not some rich dude bragging, but it's like, holy shit, this guy has actually done the thing that we've all said. It's amazing in Australia, and maybe I'm just kind of thinking for myself, but it's amazing in Australia how we've got the whole tall poppy thing. This is 13 years in the making, and it's like this is the place that I want to be in 13 years. Like, how do I kind of get there?
One of the cool things, so as you guys know, like I released like a YouTube video breaking down this property that I was brought. Like I had like 50, well, probably more, probably getting close to 100 people now reach out being like, thanks, like you've actually just shown all the numbers. There's like, done a bad math anyway, but most buyers agents talk a big game of like, oh, look what I've got, blah, blah, blah. But they don't give you any addresses or like show the properties. They just talk this number of, oh, I've got a 20 mil portfolio, blah, blah, blah. Like it's just all nonsense. They're not telling you that they're making $2-3 million a year from their buyer's agency.
I'm gonna bring this
Steve,
comment up.
What would you do without? So this is the Oz property portfolio here now. Maybe I should have asked you beforehand. But so at the outset, with these are the purchases that we've made, right? And we're sharing all of this publicly for everyone.
Next week,
Yeah, true. We're going to do it next week. But so we've got 4 purchases valued at, we purchased them for 2.6 and they're now valued at 2.9-ish. What would you be doing for us now? What's our next move? We've got 4 residentials. One of them's a unit block. One is a development site potential. One is and then 2 renovations. 1 unit block, 1 development, and 2, renos to boost the equity.
So what you guys are doing, you're basically compressing my 15-year plan that I did through not doing developments and big subdivisions and stuff like that by speeding it along with these kind of renos and subdivisions, things like that. As you're probably aware, your bottleneck's going to become servicing. So that's where you need to be mindful. And you actually won't know when that's going to happen because I've hit the servicing wall 7-8 times before. It keeps coming because interest rates keep changing. Where this plan might open up where I'll say, oh, look, you're probably due for a commercial next one. If we're talking at that point, say it's in 12 months' time and interest rates come down to 4.5%, which I don't think they will, but example, cool, no, there's probably another resi there. Let's buy another 1 or 2 resis because we've got the servicing. I saw a comment that you popped up about someone saying about the cash, saying, oh,
before we do that, I just wanted to say this is somebody, Adam's taking action. He's saying, yep, pretty much my last 6 years, but on smaller scale. But not on smaller scale. So I wanted to, I suppose, take heart because whether you're doing it with an $800,000 property, whether you're doing it with $8 million property, you're still taking action. You're taking one of those paths that Joe spoke about earlier. So keep on taking action, doing it within your own risk and your own kind of, we can all eventually WAGMI. We're all going to make it, I suppose, or we all can make it. That's a bit woo-woo. But anyway, so Jenny said, she said, I think it's important to reiterate that you put close to 1.6 million your own cash into this, and then that's fair enough. I wanted to counterbalance both those comments.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, but again, I did it through property as well. I built the residential to get that cash. You're not going to save that, which is why we're doing property. But let's look at this. So let's go.
That's such a great point. $1.5 million, but also that's one property cycle. That's one, that's one property cycle of the portfolio.
Yep. So the good question by Jenny. So this is if I didn't have a large portfolio. You want to zoom in? Yep. Can you see my screen or not yet?
Yep. I can see.
Yeah. Just do that zooming in thing. Yeah. Perfect.
Yep. So if I did a 20% deposit, so you're effectively going to need 745, which is a bit less than half. Which again, not being arrogant, that's still a lot of money. But I'm just showing you
750.
That's right. So you need 750.
Yep.
Which because obviously I'm on 50% deposit, where we're 2/5 of that. So cool. So you can do it like that. It's just going to push your scale out a bit more. I've done high interest rates. If we go, let's just say I don't know, average 5%. Let's keep it simple numbers. 5. Yeah, that's fine. Depreciating 20 grand. It's just pushing it out. Mine was 8 years. Now it becomes a 12-year. But I get a 300K passive income. So that's what you do is if you didn't have the deposit. But it's also more risk here. If interest rates go up to 8-9%, you're dipping into your own pocket. So it's balancing the risk by how aggressive you want to be. But it's commercial still looks cool. Getting an 80% loan, and we can do whatever you want. Let's keep it simple numbers because most people aren't going to go out and buy a $3 million asset. So you've got 240 grand cash.
I guess what I took away from what Jenny's comment is just factoring in the time, because it is $1.5 million that has needed to be accumulated. But it is just 13 years later. 13 years is it 13 years is a long freaking time. It's just you started early and started young. What have we? So what are you showing us?
I was just doing $1 million because I didn't want to most people. Oops, did I accidentally close that?
Okay. Got rid of it.
Can you say that still?
No, it's
Oh,
gone.
bring it up.
Never mind. I was just doing $1 million to
Yeah, we
show you
can.
could still get like a passive income. I could theoretically have put that 1.5 mil into a cash 1.5 mil commercial and had a $90,000 passive income from the get-go. But by doing it my way, I've got a 200. Now I've got a 250 grand passive income in 7-8 years. So you can see how I've really magnified it threefold.
Really balancing the risk and reward.
Yeah, I'm balancing the risk versus reward by exactly doing that. And like I said, I could have leveraged up and bought a 9 mil asset and had a 1.2 mil passive income. But do I need it? No, you know me, I'm pretty simple bloke.
Extreme, yeah. You're okay at lawn bowls too. What I was going to say, it all comes down to those resources. Like, what is your time? How much money do you have? And how much risk tolerance and how much skill? So those are the kind of things that we love to talk about here. It's like, what are those? Yeah. So,
mate, this has been an unreal question.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy another one in the next kind of few months. So get me back on, and we'll go through the next purchase.
Few months. Far out. Chill out, mate. Leave some for the rest of us.
Yeah, we need some.
They're out there, right?
I want to point that out though. So I always get asked by people saying, "Oh, you're a buyer's agent. You're going to keep the good deals for yourself." This property was on the market, and I presented it to clients, and they didn't want to buy it. Like one of them was like, "I don't want to pay 6% when you told me the yield 6.5%." The other client didn't like Logan as an area, so they said no to it. The funny thing is, once I bought it myself and I told them I bought it, they got all huffy and puffy at me and saying I should have pushed them harder into getting it. So it's one of those ones like you can't win. Like it's this the weird FOMO, which is also how the property market works, as we know. Like the sheep come based on FOMO. It also happens when you've got a buyer's agent.
Well, yeah. Well, it's the same as you, right? Like there were 4 other offers on there and you had to up your offer to get it taken. But it's the same as the Oz Prop portfolio. I presented these deals. 3 of the 4 deals were presented to clients and they rejected them because of the work that was needed. And it's fine if you don't want to do the renovations. It's just, again, slow lane, fast lane, kind of Autobahn, super, super duper fast. And the more work, like in life, in property, you're paid in proportion to the problems that you solve. So if you were going to go out there and create a renovation project and you put in $50,000, you're going to get $100,000 back, like another $50,000 out of it, or 150 or something like that. But you're solving a problem. Same with development. You're knocking down one house, you're putting 3 houses up. Again, you're solving problems, but there is time, energy, and effort into it. And if you can buy in a great area and get great capital growth, do that as well, because you don't need to go crazy and force the value, but you can, and it will accelerate things. It's just going to be a bit quicker.
But it's also what you know as well. Like I've never touched. I've done one duplex, but wasn't that great of an experience. Like I haven't gone down that road because I'm not educated enough in it. I've only really got educated the last couple. I've only really got educated the last couple of years. So that's why I've got the new book coming out, and I've done it with Liam, my general manager, who's got way more experience than me. And we've kind of combined our knowledge to say, hey, this is everything we've learned. Here it is. So like, you don't do unless you understand it, because there's people that burn themselves in renos and developments. But when you know the numbers, you're not doing the reno unless you know you're getting at least double, triple back. That's why you do it.
Yeah. I'm getting a bit lost in the comments. People are asking where your lamp is, Joe. You've gotten rid of the lamp. Like you bring back the lamp. Make Oz property lamp focused again. I love lamp. I love lamp. So I'm getting back to let's just say this. So Brian asked thoughts about buying commercial. We're going to go to questions and then we're going to wrap up with there's something special that I'll share. So stay tuned. Mm-hmm. But thoughts about buying commercial and SMSF and value-adding mezzanines for growth, selling for 10% CGT and repeating. Sounds a bit complicated, doesn't it?
There's a lot of words in there.
Hey, take out self-managed super fund, because that is just a cool tax vehicle where we save lots of money on tax. Yeah. So like that's the benefit of self-managed super fund. But that's a brilliant strategy. Like we do that with clients all the time. Our staff do it as well. It's no different to buying a house, doing a major reno, then selling it. That's effectively what it is. You're buying like a warehouse, you're building a mezzanine floor, which is, to be honest, easier. It's get some tradesmen in that can build it. They knock it up in a week, 2 weeks tops kind of thing. Done, dusted, happy days. There's no complications about finding termites in the wall or moisture or damp and blah, 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 blah. And then selling and then going again and scaling up. So that's what a lot of people do. That comes with risk though as well.
I think you might be contravening the SIS Act, which is a superannuation investment thing if you start renovating. So yeah, just be mindful of
No,
that.
You can renovate. It's not gonna
You
affect that.
have to pay cash. You have to use a lot of cash.
That's what I was going to say. You can do it, but it's got to be cash. So it's not leveraged money anymore. It's got to be cash. So that the people that are doing, they're the ones that have the spare 90 to 150 grand to kind of do it. But then you have to sell because you can't refinance to get that money back. So outside the self-managed fund, 100%, you do that strategy. You go to the bank, get a valuation, get the money, you can go again. That one you do have to do the scale up.
Yeah. Luke's asking anything one. Luke's got a cracking channel too. He said, what about buying resi with grannies for lower land tax, like your Eagleby versus commercial land tax bills because of concentration on one title? Does that make sense?
Love your YouTube, Luke. I don't know what it's called. Drop that in the comments because here's a great
purpose property or something. Yes, I think it is.
There you go.
Check it out.
There you go. What's the answer to this one?
I love it. Like I've got quite a few properties that have granny flat potential for that exact reason. I never try to make my decisions based on tax. I'll try to mitigate tax, but I'm not going to make my decision based on tax. And that's the common one I get. Like every time I post a YouTube video, people go, "Oh, you're forgetting tax. You're paying so much tax, you're because you're passive income." And I'm just like, "All right, thanks, mate." Like, go ask your boss for a pay rise and say, "Don't worry about it because you don't want pay more tax."
Yeah. So, what is the answer to that? I'm making money. That's why I'm paying more in tax. But from a net perspective, I'm up, right? Yeah.
So but again, like that's why you diversify. But I do that for risk, not necessarily the land tax. But they both kind of playing together a little bit. But that's a good question. But I prefer a mix. Like and I mentioned at the start, I've still got a few properties that have the granny flat potential, and I'm kind of umming and ahhing. Which again, I know I'm supposed to be the strategy guy, but there's always different ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, and also if you're 100% commercial, it's you're kind of leaving a little bit of risk on the table for the exposure. And if you've got exposure to the residential market and then the granny flat market, but then it's the granny flat headaches that. But then again, a really nicely done granny flat doesn't really cause any more headaches than a duplex or anything else.
Yeah, it just depends on what your strategy. If it's cash flow, then grannies can be a great option.
What was that, Jeff?
This is Adam. I think I might have to get Adam on a live. It looks like, as long as he's not a buyer's agent, but he said for people that don't have access to cash.
What's wrong with having buyer's agents, Jeff?
I mean, don't ask me. I'm not. SMSF is a pathway. So I started in SMSF, had 350K, bought commercial 450, now worth 700, paid it off, returning. So this is somebody who's doing it at a small scale. So you might have to reach out, Adam, if you're comfortable sharing. But let's move on to some questions. So. I wanted to ask, this is an interesting one. Do you find that the higher the yield, the lower the prospective capital growth? I don't think it does. I think it's probably the other way around, isn't it, Steve? Because then rents people pay more for it, won't they?
There's a gray area in this, and I answer it in two parts. If you're buying a very, very high yield, then yes, low. Same as residential. If I'm going to buy it in like, I don't know, Blackwater or something where it's like a 5,000 person town and getting a 9% yield, and yes, the capital growth prospects are way, way less. If we're still going capital cities, no, then I don't think that like Brisbane at the moment, you're getting kind of like 6% for retail, industrial probably 5.5%, and then Perth, you're getting 7% for retail and kind of 6% for industrial. I don't think they're necessarily going to have less capital growth than Sydney and Melbourne that might be like 4 or 5%. The same argument as residential. Like, and this is the part of trying to pick the cycles. But yeah, the extremes, yes, I think there's an argument. Same as if you're buying something at 2% in a really good area, that might still have the capital growth, but then you're losing effectively like 4% equivalent because you're not getting that yield. So it's kind of that balance. But in that midsection, it's exact same as residential. I think they're wrong. You're buying the area that you think is going to have the capital growth. The mid-range, I think, is where you get the best capital growth in that cycle. Not necessarily long-term, but in that cycle.
Yeah, nice. I think we'll finish off on this one. It's a nice rounding out question, unless you've got any burning ones we need to ask, Joe. But Sabi has asked, and this is a big question, so I'm not expecting us to come up with novels on this, but when you find out residential property or any property, what is the main things you need to consider, and how do I find out what to consider? As in, are we talking due diligence, Sabi? Are we talking like This is a very big question. So we're talking for a particular
written in
property.
the form of Shakespeare. Let me read this again. I
I like it. It's a great question.
In a form of Shakespeare.
When you
It's
find out-
like a to be, not to be. What is the?
Yeah,
what is the
it feels like it. Things I should
okay.
consider so that I can consider. I think for me, it comes down with like high level macro due diligence. Major things: bushfires, floods, easements, value. Is this a good property in a good location? Like these things you can't change. You can't buy, like if it is a property that is in a flood zone that's opposite whatever, a vape shop. It's not, you can't change those things. So I think it's getting the core important things nailed down first. And then for me, that's probably my answer is macro bigger things. Don't do, like, oh my gosh, like we've done so many purchases where we've pulled out of a deal because of something stupid, like it doesn't have an air conditioner, it doesn't, the water heater's busted, and the person doesn't want to pay, like the vendor doesn't want to pay for it. Those things are things that you can fix. If it's in an amazing location, then you should just do the deal because it stacks up and makes sense. Now, if you're paying a super duper premium and that, $5,000 tips it over the edge of no value, walk away. It makes sense if you can go find a better asset. But yeah, for me, it's high level macro stuff. I don't know. What about you, Steve? How do you think about this?
Yeah, you pretty much said what I was going to say, but I'll say it in a different way, is just to make sure you don't make a mistake, which is obviously checking the macro things and just keeping it simple. Like,
yeah,
I know we're buyers agents, Joe, and we're going to do the micro stuff as well. But if you get the macro stuff right, you're going to be okay long term. Like every capital city and major regional town in Australia has quadrupled in value in the last 30 years. So like you said, if you get those fundamentals right, you're going to be okay long term. And there's so many resources now that you can actually cross-check it and do it. But get people that do it all day, every day like me and you won't make a mistake.
I reckon you can, if you can do the due diligence with a lot of like with free tools and some paid tools within a minute on a deal, right? Like I assess deals within 60 seconds to see, yes, I'm going to buy this one. No, I'm not. Unfortunately, after inspect, you've got to then inspect to then go to the second phase of due diligence, which is inspecting it and setting all of that stuff up. But like in terms of looking online and doing the online due diligence and like stage 1 due diligence, that stuff is very, very quick that you can do, and don't waste your time on it.
Probably to answer the question as well is picking that area initially is probably the toughest decision. Like you're talking about like the macro for that area already. We got to talk about the macro to actually even get to that area in the first place, and that's where it becomes overwhelming. That's where every second like buyer's agent and investor has their own 2 cents of where the next hotspot's coming, whether it's coming from interest rates, vacancy rates, days on market, what infrastructure is going in the area, how easy to commute. Like everyone's got their own flavor where that's coming from, and I think that's where most people get they overanalyze, or they kind of get the wool pulled over their eyes because they've pulled down a route like I did early on, and it went down the cash flow route, just being like, cash flow, it's got to be cash flow positive, otherwise don't buy it. Like, who cares if it was $50 a week positive or negative? I could have afforded that. So they're getting the strategy right at the start is probably the biggest thing.
Damn it, Steve. You pretty much, I'll go a bit more macro on that strategy piece. For me, it's about the finances. It's, well, how does property move me forward in my goal? If I, and having those conversations with the broker, because if you're buying a 4% yielding property, does that enable you to still then keep buying? Is that then giving you the capital growth? But does that sort of hamstrung you too much? So it's kind of, yes, or I agree 100% with Joe and Steve, the micro on the properties, and then, but making sure that property aligns with your strategy, because don't go and buy, if your first property and you've got a 200K deposit, maybe commercial is not the way to go, or maybe it is, but just figure out at what stage of life you're at and what you need for that next property to keep buying the next or get to that goal as quick as you can. That's what I would say.
Great way to round this session out. Yeah, Steve Palise from Palise Properties, thank you so much for doing this. Where can people learn more? Because this is not just like, this is the challenge with commercial. It goes deep. Like there are layers and layers and layers in due diligence. And I've been buying property for a decade now, and I still wouldn't buy a commercial property myself. There's no way in hell I'm doing that. And there will be a point where we're reaching out on the Oz property portfolio. It's not right now because we're not at that stage, but there will be a point where we're doing a commercial. How do people learn about this stuff? How do we kind of get a commercial property if we want one? What's the go?
Yeah, so as you guys know, I give all my education for free. So depending on what medium you like, I've obviously got the free book. So we got that. Then Jeff just put up the commercial properties. I've got a 10-hour course that's for free.
It's only
as well.
10 hours.
I actually recorded for 30 hours and there's 30 hours worth of footage, but my social media team said you can't release a 30-hour course. No one will actually do it. Everyone wants the keys, the get rich quick keys in less than 10 hours. But if you sign up to it, it's free. The extra modules will be getting added over time. So I got that. And then if you're more of a podcast person, I've got a 10-episode podcast series, basically going through the course or the book in talking form with a host, with Andrew Bean. So that if you want to do that at the gym on the car drive, but yeah, there's no excuse anymore. It's all out there.
Well, the other thing to mention with your course is this was an ad we were running for you, and it was like $6,000 or something like that, wasn't it? So you're getting that sort of value compressed in a course. Steve Palise of Palise Properties, you are amazing. Thank you very much for sharing. Thanks for awesome to see that this is possible. For me, that's the inspiration. Is you worked your ass off. You battled hard. You made mistakes along the way. You've created something incredible, and you're now soon, in the next 5-10 years, going to really kill it. But you're setting up the chess pieces to be able to checkmate it.
And if you've gotten value from this team, make sure you give us that 5-star on Spotify, team, because we need to get this valuable content, reach it as far wide as we can. But go on, Steve.
But any questions, guys, just shoot me private message, email, Steve at Palise Property. I'm more than happy to chat, as most people are testing this group.
Greg in particular.
Greg loves me. Thanks, Greg. Love you, mate.
Let's go buy a commercial property to 150K commercial passive income. Go, guys. See you next week.
See you guys.